Well, welcome to the Business Growth Factor, where we have conversations about building better businesses. My name is Josh Leyenhorst, and I'm here with Lyndon Smith. And what are we talking about today, Lyndon?
Hey Josh, so we're going to be chatting about business rhythms, and what we mean by business rhythms is just kind of that cadence that you have in the different areas of your business. So those daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual rhythms, and how that ties into operations, finance, and all the different facets of your business.
That sounds awesome. I guess maybe one of the questions that this would help satisfy are like, what are some of the things that I should be doing in my business over the course of the month or a quarter or a year to move my business forward? Because a lot of people get into business because they're good at what they do, right? They're good at their craft, but then they find themselves kind of bumping into a situation as their business scales and grows, where they need help actually running their business. And so this is like getting into some of those specific rhythms that may be helpful for that.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think if we had to sort of break it into sort of or create some context around it, the longer terms or the longer those rhythms are, like the annual that annual meetings that you set up, or those sessions that you set up annually, those are more like pulling on those strategic and visionary goal setting levers, whereas the daily and weekly kind of rhythms that you set up in your business are more tactical, operational, and just keeping the finger on the pulse and keeping the system running, right?
Okay, so we're talking like strategic and tactical type rhythms today.
Yeah, and we'll bounce around between, like I said before, the different sort of facets of business. So, you know, operational, financial, what those rhythms could look like. So, I think I'll just kick it off by starting with a daily rhythm. So, like a daily a daily huddle with your team. So what's the purpose around that, and what does that actually mean? So, I mean, if you're having a daily rhythm, it's kind of more at a management level with your team, like I mentioned, and it's just getting a keeping the finger on the pulse and just checking, getting some progress updates, taking a look at what's the focus for today, and effectively understanding what obstacles or bottlenecks are getting in the way, because you as a manager or a leader in your business are responsible for removing those obstacles for your team and empowering them to be successful, and allowing them to move forward intentionally. So that's kind of like looking at a daily rhythm. In an operations context, it's maybe like a project manager. I think maybe creating or coming off the back end of the pandemic, where we got a lot more people working remotely. Those daily huddles where you're doing that remote check-in to say, hey, what did you manage to get done yesterday? What's on the agenda for today? And what can I help you with? What can I, where can I support you as you're progressing and moving through your job, essentially.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like I remember one place where I used to work, we would do that with our team as well. So we'd have like a little daily stand-up huddle, be like 15 minutes, like no longer than that.
Yeah.
And usually, what are some of the priorities for the day, right? What was something that was big yesterday that you had to get done? How did that go?
Yeah.
One thing I felt was helpful as well, and this also moves into like monthly, but I don't want to jump right into that yet. But one of our questions also was like, is there anything that's bugging you or where you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, as a manager, you just have to be prepared if you're going to be asking that question. You may need to be able to address those issues, right? So if you ask the question, is there something that you're stuck on or something that's bugging you? If you're like, oh yeah, this system that we're dealing with keeps doing this, right?
Yeah.
If you're not going to be able to have the capacity to address that, then it almost comes across as seeming like it's more of a formality discussion rather than a purposeful discussion where you're actually trying to help your team do what it is that they need to do.
Well, I think and this is a great point. So these are the things that you can then push into the more like your weekly rhythms or your monthly rhythms, where it's activities that are actually going to take, or challenges that are actually going to take a little bit longer than a day to address, right? So we're tabling this to say, there's a problem with the system here. Let's bring this up in our weekly management meeting or our monthly meetings that we're having. So that at a higher level, we're pushing those rhythms up to a higher level in the organization so that they have the opportunity to address those challenges. And if it's like a systems challenge, like I said, it's not something that can necessarily get addressed immediately, but it may need a little bit more consideration, a little bit more planning, a little bit more strategy around addressing that particular challenge that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. And I guess in having those meetings, it at least helps identify that those are issues, and then they can work their way up the chain to actually be addressed.
Yeah. And then, so I think just keeping the momentum here. So we've spoken a little bit about the daily rhythms, and then the next part that we obviously going to go to is the weekly rhythms. So, this is more. You're still keeping the finger on the pulse, but we're taking a look at like weekly objectives, how we track in with certain projects, taking a look at KPIs. This is where we're kind of linking, the performance of our team, of our employees, and tying it into KPIs, so that we're not looking at it like after 3 months and being like, oh, our team are failing or we're not performing. You're kind of still keeping the finger on the pulse with everything that's happening as a manager, as a leader in the company, not necessarily at an executive level, although as an executive, you're still keeping track of everything that's going on in the organization, right?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like if you're you got your hands on the big steering wheel of a massive ship, right? Just constantly kind of readjusting it to align to where it is that you're trying to get to, right? Sort of these, one way we used to talk about it with one of the teams I was on is just 1 degree corrections, right? So that you're not finding yourself in like a month or 2 months totally off course. You're like, okay, let's swing it back in. Let's swing it back in.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I think it's such a great analogy, that 1 degree correction. So, yeah, I mean, if you're doing that daily, those incremental changes, and you're just staying on top of things, and making sure. I mean, we had this conversation around OKRs, but effectively setting proper goals that are aligned with the organization's objectives. Then and filtering that down through the organization to an operational level or a tactical level, then that whatever you're working on is aligned with the longer term objectives. And we typically do those objective setting or those goal setting every 3 months. We'll get into that in a bit, but yeah. So we're taking a look at like weekly, and I love how you've used the analogy of that one degree correction, so that you're not completely off course. Yeah.
And so I guess in mentioning OKRs, I guess there's probably a place here for like on the weekly side of things for looking at some KPIs, right? Like some key performance indicators. I know like on the finance operations front, one of the teams I used to run, we would look at certain metrics to get a sense of how well things were going. Even, as far as like we had all, like in our EP department, we had all of the invoices flow through one particular email address. So whenever we met as a team, I'd be like, hey, well, how many emails are left in this email address? Because it was usually an indicator of like how busy the team was getting, right? If all of a sudden there was like 75 sitting in there, it's like, okay, it was almost like the canary in the coal mine, right? Where you're like, hey, you guys are getting a little bit busy. We need to try to find a way to help out on the capacity front. But if you were like kind of sitting around say 20, then you're like, okay, we're maintaining things really well. And so maybe on a weekly basis, if you're going to be meeting with your team to look at various things, maybe that's a good point to start introducing some key performance indicators to look at to see how you're tracking and if you can realign as needed.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree with that. And I think, the other thing is, this is still maybe looking at it at a weekly, very much at an operational level. So, how's the project performing? What are the things that we need to, like how many, I'm just trying to think of a good example here. How many sort of purchase orders have we placed in the last week? Those are like sort of metrics that we can look at. It all depends on the nature of the business and the structure of the organization. But I mean, you have those metrics that you're looking at every single week to say, all right, we need to get a whole lot more done than what we've been doing, or we're pretty much on track. And we can see just by having those KPIs in place. If we're going off track or if we're on track or ahead of schedule on a few things.
Right.
Yeah.
I think like from a finance perspective, one of the things I found is really helpful for businesses, and this may be a little bit ambitious for some who aren't yet doing this, but even doing bank reconciliations on a weekly basis as opposed to, say, monthly when the statement comes in, just allows for a lot more hands-on and active management of cash flow as opposed to getting to the end of the month and just looking at what happened. I mean, even daily, if you can reconcile your bank daily, you can start to deploy cash in a lot more proactive of a way. But weekly bank recs is pretty key. And then also, for companies that have accounts receivable balances, that like weekly is a good cadence to get into as far as just following up on anything that's outstanding, because otherwise you can find yourself 3-4 weeks down the road being like, oh man, that invoice is still outstanding. Like we have to call that person, and then then the conversation is usually like, oh, you should have let me know like 3 weeks ago. You're like, yeah, I know. I should actually be looking at this weekly, right? So even just setting a slot in the calendar to be like, look at your accounts receivable balances. If there's anything outstanding, just give them a call. It's a good time to do it.
Yeah, I think another example of that, and maybe a little bit off topic here, is the expense claims. How frequently should you be submitting your expense claims? Because those can pile up and then a little bit messy and throw things off. So yeah, I think just like staying on top of those expense claims. I think a weekly cadence on that is pretty solid, depending on how your schedule looks. But just blocking out some time, 10-15 minutes, just running those through and getting them done. Otherwise, if you're doing them every 3 months, it could piss a few people off, upset a few people, or
yeah, that's right. The project manager will start looking at their budget and be like, whoa, all of a sudden we have all these expenses that came in. You're like, oh yeah, sorry, that was for the last 3 months.
Yeah, it's only $10,000. It's yeah. Cool. And then, the next up is we could look at a bi-weekly rhythm as well. I think it's, it all depends on the business. And I think, part of the conversation is having that flexibility, and should we be doing this every week or every month?
Right.
Just being able to have that, I don't know if agility is the adaptability, with your team to say, this is working, this is not working, in terms of, this is too frequent, it's a waste of our time. We could do this every other week, and then just adjusting accordingly.
That's probably a good point there, Lyndon, just so that it's not like, hey, this is a hard and fast rule where this should be done weekly, because every business is different, every team is different, right? And so maybe it's, hey, let's start doing this, and then maybe they find that doing it bi-weekly makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've found that sometimes a weekly meeting is just it's too frequent, and it ends up just wasting everybody's time. Even if it's just a 15-minute check-in or a half-an-hour check-in, it's taken away from. People have to be available for those meetings. So, if you've got guys out in the field and they got to be in person, or they got to jump on their computer to jump into a meeting, it's more than a half an hour or 15 minutes, right? So,
it comes up quick.
Sure does.
One place where I was running a team, like we had this goal of meeting with each person on our team, like on a weekly basis, just to really enhance the relationships within our team. And so you would, meet with your team. Is getting away from the idea of, and this is, a different cadence, but like getting away from the idea of only meeting for HR purposes once a year for a review. Like, well, if you meet with each person on your team once a week, then you really get a sense of how they're doing, what they're wrestling with, how you can help them.
Yeah.
So we're like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So we started trying it. We're like, that is too quick. It's a hard rhythm to maintain, because you have your meeting and it feels like 10 minutes later you're into the next one. That's how quick a week can go by sometimes, right? And so we're like, okay, well, maybe we should bump that to bi-weekly. Maybe that's even a monthly thing, right?
Yeah, and I think you've got to just test that out and get a feel for what that rhythm looks like in your business and for your team, right? So if you get the sense that it's too frequent, then adjust it. It is too frequent. Go with your gut feel on it. I think these just going to a couple of other notes that I made specifically for this. You want to make sure that each of these meetings have a clear set agenda and objectives, so that there's a purpose behind it, that you're not just meeting for the sake of meeting, and Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna talk business here, but like, what is the objective? What is the outcomes that we're looking at, so that everybody's walking away with action items with clear
Hmm.
objectives, and where there's a degree of accountability, by having that weekly or bi-weekly or even monthly meeting set up, where they're coming back and they're either reporting on the performance or the activity or the project. um, where they're giving some feedback, and just knowing, and I think we had this conversation a little bit earlier, just knowing that you've got that meeting coming up, it kind of creates that accountability to say, oh, I better get this done because I got a meeting, I got to report back
Right.
to people tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if it's the second week in a row now that I haven't got it done, I'm going to look bad, and people don't want to
Yeah.
look bad. So even if they're doing it in the last minute, it's still making sure that the business is progressing and it's getting done, and those metrics are being looked at, and that the company's performing. Although ultimately, you don't want people to be doing things at the last minute. You don't want to have that culture in your business, but you
Hmm.
are, by having these meetings set up, with what's the word I'm looking for? That consistency is, you're creating accountability through that,
Hmm.
through the peers, through the leadership, and yeah,
Probably in doing so, you're actually establishing a weekly cadence for the people on your team where they're like, okay, I know this meeting's coming up on Friday, so on
hmm
Wednesday I need to make sure that I've kind of looked at this and I've tracked the progress on this so I can adjust whatever might need to be done so I
yeah,
have something to report on Friday, right? Like when you set up those structures, I think inevitably, it's like the first law of economics, like people respond to incentives, right? And so the incentive is, hey, I want to make sure I can successfully report on what it is that we're going to be reviewing on Friday. So I need to make sure that on Wednesday I'm diving into this, right? And so they're
yeah,
now setting up their own weekly cadences to meet that objective and keep that on track.
100%. Yeah, it kind of it creates like a KPI to a degree. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the key performance indicator is, is this guy, is this person in our company, delivering the information that we need in a timely manner, and
Mm-hmm.
either it's a no or maybe yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like what you said just about the importance of having agendas, though, too, like having specific objectives for the meetings. That it's not just meeting for the sake of meeting, because we've all had way too many of those in our lives, right? But if it's like, hey, these are the three things that we're going to dive into. It's going to be quick. It's going to be snappy. We're going to focus on it, and then for the daily ones, like that can be done in 15 minutes, maybe, right? The
yeah,
weekly ones, try to keep it to maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and it's like this is our hard cutoff, so we got to stay on track. Especially if you end up doing these weekly meetings, say on like a Monday morning, oftentimes the first 10 minutes end up being a bit of a recap of the weekend, and it starts to eat into the objectivity, like the objects of the objectives of the meeting, right?
yeah. That's water cooler chat. That shouldn't be
Yeah.
happens at meetings. We can allot 5 minutes just to kind of break the ice, warm things up. But
Hmm.
if you've got an hour blocked out or a half an hour blocked out, you want to make sure that you're covering everything that needs to be covered on that agenda.
Yeah.
And the what was I going to say now? Yeah, the agenda is super important, and I think making sure that people have clear action items, even if not everybody has, but certain people in the room or in that meeting have those action items. You're reflecting on it the next time you meet. So, hey, Josh, you said you were going to get this done by this time, so you've committed to that in front of everybody in the meeting. We're going to reflect on that next week. So, Josh, how did you go with that? Yeah,
Hmm.
you can report back and you say confidently, I've got it done, or these are the obstacles that got in the way. We need help with IT, we need help with marketing, we need help with HR or another division of the business, and that's what those meetings are, there to achieve. So like, all right, so we understand that there's an obstacle. Let's take this offline, create another meeting, right? But
But
it's
it's
not
focused.
consuming everybody in that room's time. We can just take it offline and say,
Hmm.
all right, 5 minutes or 10 minutes after this meeting, if everybody's available, we can just run through those details together and get a clear action plan together. And you're documenting it as such, because you're going to say, all right, we're gonna have a meeting offline, and you're going to report back on the results of that meeting as well.
Hmm. I think that's a good point, and I think maybe a good way for business owners to think about this then as well when it comes to meetings is look at the effective hourly rate of each of your employees, whether they're paid hourly or salary. You can kind of approximate an hourly rate for them, and then just get a sense of it, right? Be like, hey, if everyone's sitting around this table Monday morning, and if it's say costing us $600 an hour for the company, to have this meeting, who needs to be there? Let's stay on topic so that we're not talking about something, specific to one individual or a couple people where it's maybe just relevant to them, and everyone else is just kind of sitting there and start scrolling on their phones or whatever, right? It's like, okay, this meeting is costing the company, say $600 to do. So what kind of value is coming out of this meeting that would justify having everybody sit around the table?
Yeah. So, and I love the word that you use there, value. So what is the value for everybody in the meeting? And it depends on the types of meetings that you have. We used to have meetings with our project managers, bi-weekly cadence, and part of it was, everybody, we treated the first like 5 minutes of it as a bit of a learning, everybody gets an opportunity to present or share something with the team.
Oh, that's a neat idea.
And then it gets a little bit of a debate and discussion around that, short and sweet, and then we move on to business. But it opens up the meeting. There's some value for everybody on the team, some lessons learned. Maybe there's something that happened on site where a crane failed, or something happened where now there's an opportunity to share so that people don't make the same mistakes, right? Or maybe there's something that's happening in the market where with vendors or suppliers that we just want to bring that to everybody's attention. So we have that opportunity to learn. So someone in the group will share, and we kind of prompt that, and we say, "Hey, Josh, at the next meeting, I'd like you to come up with something, and we'll take that offline, and we'll create a topic." And and we keep it short and sweet. You don't want to bog people down with a preparation for a little bit of a lesson. I think in BNI, what do they call it in BNI? It's like they've got a name for it, like a little, I don't know what they call it now, but it's when someone does like their lunch and learn kind of thing. It's a short little presentation around a topic that's relevant to the team or to the business or to the industry.
So at least like everyone's learning together from the experiences of each other and has the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and you try and keep it to like 5 minutes. You don't want to overwhelm everyone with all this information. They got a lot of the times people know this, but it creates a little bit of leadership because people now get to stand up and present to the team, and everybody gets you cycle around, and everybody gets the opportunity to actually do this. And like I said, I mean that could be like a weekly or a bi-weekly rhythm that you have there. So coming back to rhythms and the monthly rhythms. This is where we start looking at it from not necessarily a tactical or operations perspective, but we're moving more into performance metrics, analytics, and leaning more
strategy,
to the strategy side of it, right? So maybe that's something that you could sort of share more on, because I mean, as a business owner, I trust that they're looking at their P&Ls, balance sheets, those type of things. At a month on a monthly basis. Maybe you could just speak to that a bit and lean into that conversation.
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because not everybody does. A lot of people just look at it at the end of the year when they get their corporate tax turned done or whatever. Some people don't even look at it closely, but ideally what you should be doing is looking at your financials on a monthly basis. So if you're keeping your books up to date regularly, then you can look at your income statement and your balance sheet. Those are kind of the two things the key statements you want to be looking at, just to get a sense of how profitable you were, and if there's anything sitting on your balance sheet that you should be aware of to address. What we usually do with our virtual CFO services is we'll actually work through it with clients. We'll look at some of the key profitability and cash flow drivers to look at how are you looking from a profitability perspective, what can you start moving next month to optimize that, as well as cash flow, right? So looking at a lot of the key components that will drive cash flow, because at the end of the day, from a finance perspective anyways, business owners need cash, right? They need cash to operate, and so having consistent positive cash flow is pretty key, and so looking at those drivers on a monthly basis is very, very important. There's also tax implications too, right? So usually once you start getting to a monthly rhythm, you're looking at some monthly tax remittances to whatever government agency you're remitting to. So usually you want to keep your books up to date so that on a monthly basis you can take care of the taxes, you can look at your financials, you can look at these metrics, and then use those metrics, use your financials to make decisions for the upcoming month. What should you be focusing on to move that needle towards enhanced profitability, towards sustained or improving your cash flow position?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think from an operations perspective, to add to that, you'll be looking at what did sales look like in the last month. What do the market conditions look like? What does the competitive landscape look like? So you're starting to look more outward, and you're bringing that data in and making some adjustments to like how you're operating your business. So yeah. Like I said, we're moving more. Like the longer you stretch the term, it becomes more and more strategic on how you drive the business forward there.
Yeah, and this is where the way we'll often describe what we do is kind of like Google Maps for business. It's where you start to look at, are we heading towards the destination that we're planning to go to, and how long is it going to take us to get there, right? And so usually you talked about like your revenue forecasting and stuff. You want to be looking at, okay, what's our sales pipeline look like, right? Are we positioned based on what we had anticipated, or do we have some kind of revenue cliff maybe in 3 months, or we have to start beefing up our sales activity to try to address that? If you can look at that on a monthly basis, at least you can anticipate it and you can plan for it. Maybe you're looking at your revenue forecast and you're like, oh wow, we're going to have like a super intense month in 3 months, right? Maybe we actually need to hire some capacity to be able to meet that as well. So you're looking outwards, not long term, like a year or 5 years or whatever, but you're looking outwards for the next at least 3 to 5, 6 months to get a sense of how things are looking, to make decisions now that will best equip you for that. Maybe you're going to have like a bit of a cash shortfall, right? So that's actually one thing I didn't mention either, is like cash flow forecasting would be part of this too on a monthly basis if you can. Weekly or biweekly is like ideal, but like if you can do it monthly, you can really forecast out fairly well as well. But then if you can see, hey, look, we're gonna have a bit of a cash shortfall in 3 months, you can start to make plans for that. Okay, what kind of financing options maybe do you need to cover your operations during that period of time? Because you don't want to be having those conversations with lenders at the time that you need it, right? You want to maximize your negotiating position well in advance if you can. And similarly, I suppose, if you look ahead and you're like, hey, we're going to have like a pretty like plush cash situation in a few months, you put some plans in place to deploy that cash and actually get some returns as well.
Well, I think it's also a good opportunity, like looking at these metrics. Then, if sales are increasing, what impact does that have on your workforce, right? Like your labor force, and then what impact does that have on your cash flow? What impact does that have on your hiring strategies and everything else that you're kind of looking at in the business, right? So, this is where your management team should start, finding or getting some alignment through these monthly sort of rhythms that we're talking about here.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, you're going to find out how it went with your team after the fact, right? And if you have like a really busy period, like, wow, we burned out our team. I wish we had known that in advance, right? Because you can see it. If you see it coming in advance, then you can plan for it instead of just knuckling down and getting through it and then burning out your team.
Yeah, 100%. And diminishing and eroding your culture at the end of the day, because there's a lack of planning, a lack of leadership. That's what happens, right? And that starts diminishing the culture in your organization as well. Just be mindful of our time here, Josh. I think we are going to spend a little bit more here, but this is a good conversation. So next up is the quarterly rhythms. And typically what we look at here is, and going back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks or a couple of episodes back rather, is OKRs. So setting those priorities, those goals, those key initiatives that we're going to be focusing on for the next quarter, and creating a proper set of KPIs on how we're performing, how we know that we've actually achieved those results. Um, so here, I mean, this is more of a, I would say, instead of just a meeting, it's more of a workshop rhythm that you're setting up with senior management or senior leadership or executive leadership in the business, and this kind of guides the rest of the organization. So through these initiatives or through these rhythms. That you have that you're creating maybe a 2 or a 4 hour workshop where it could be even a day, depending on the scope of your business, the size of your team, where you're actually getting out of the office and doing these workshops, off-site, where there's no distractions. But yeah, it's really just that. It's creating a vision, or taking that vision rather, and creating objectives for the next quarter, and aligning your team through those key results that you define through that.
Yeah, kind of like those big rocks, right? If
Those
anyone's
are,
like from the traction book, right?
yeah,
It's like,
top priorities. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you've got like your 1 year sort of like overarching plan, and then you've got it broken down into like your, like how do you break it down into quarterly objectives, the key things that you want to be focused on.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely important. And it's good to do that on a quarterly basis, right? Because then you can see, like, are we on track? Are we not on track? Because everything we've kind of talked about for the most part to this point is like tactical, right?
Yep.
But this is like, how are we doing as far as like progressing on strategic objectives overall?
Yeah, so this is the bigger. So we start looking at a much bigger picture here when we talk about the quarterly rhythms. Um, we do SWOT analysis. We will also consider like team building initiatives. So like how we training the team. How frequently are we looking at training the team, either on new products or new services, on company information, maybe training them on new suppliers, new vendors, maybe on clients or projects that we're engaged in. So what type of training initiatives do we set up? Where are the gaps? Do we need to maybe look at the employee diversity and inclusivity type training? Is there leadership training that we're looking at? Is there perhaps project or role specific training that we're doing? Where we're getting someone in to come and facilitate that for a group of our team. So doing that, identifying it, and working on those initiatives on a quarterly basis is also super valuable.
I like that. Like, I think, as you're talking about that, it's like, I suppose that would be the type of thing that's super important to keep a pulse on throughout the year, make sure you prioritize throughout the year. But if you don't actually calendarize it on a quarterly basis, it's going to become a once a year thing. And then at that point, it's going to be kind of reactive, like, oh, we should get a bunch of people through training quickly, right? Or you kind of plan out the next year's training, which, may not always be relevant for everybody at that particular time. So yeah, I like that. I like that quarterly rhythm for your team for sure.
It doesn't mean you're going to do the same thing every quarter. It could be like cybersecurity. Maybe this is a topic that we need to get our team dialed in on, and just some cybersecurity training, or just getting them sort of queued up and up to speed on business related matters, but not necessarily job specific. Or maybe it is job specific. Health and safety training, or
well, maybe it's kind of tied to the like the 90-day objectives, right? And so maybe you even kind of like make it a bit of a theme, right? So like this theme is all about understanding our vendors and our products better, right? And so then it's like training on the products, maybe revisiting the vendors, maybe like trying to find some new ones, renegotiating new terms. But maybe that's the theme of the month, or of the quarter rather, to try to hit those big rocks as well. Just kind of tie it all into one sort of coordinated theme, I suppose. Can't always do that, I suppose, but it might be a good way to keep it at least top of mind for everybody if it's a bit more coordinated that way.
Yeah. And then, finally, we talk about like the annual rhythm. So, I think this is more reflection. So, doing a year-end review, analyzing your achievements, like what challenges, so documenting what challenges you had along the year, and then just the financial performance. I think you could probably speak into that quite a bit. And this is also an opportunity to do some more strategic planning. So revisiting your vision, your mission, like what your values are in your company, the strategic priorities that you have for the upcoming year, and then putting some solid budgets in place for the next year. Because depending on the size and scale of your business, how you're sort of growing, you want to have that documented. You want to have a plan in place. You also want to project that plan to everybody else in your team, right? So that they know, like, this is what our goals are, and be clear on that. I think it's also a really great opportunity for the leadership, the CEO, president, VPs, depending on again how big the organization is. But it's a really great opportunity for them to actually share some industry, like an overview on what's happening in the industry and how we've performed, where we've benchmarked our business, and what we're going to do in the next year to either take back some market share or gain market share, or just set ourselves apart from like if everybody's going this way, we're going to go this way, kind of thing, or we're going against the grain, and we're just we're pushing harder, and this is what we're doing to be better than the next company, right? So just the team love that. The team, the employees, the organization love that. The leadership are looking forward, that they're communicating what that strategy looks like. All too often businesses or owners are just like, they're looking at it, they're discussing it amongst themselves, but they're never sharing it with the rest of the organization. And I think that's
a good point. Yeah.
If you're taking the business along, the organization along that journey with you, it shows that like you're actually, for one, you're looking ahead, and you're looking at the right levers and triggers, and like what's happening out in the market, and how to navigate some of the things that are coming up. So for example, in the construction industry, what does that look like over the next 10 years? What does our competitive landscape look like? This is what we see as a business. This is what we've looked at. And this is the data that we've been looking at, and how it's informed that for us. And we're just sharing that with you. And this is how our business has performed, and how we're looking at growing our business in line with some of the trends that are happening, perhaps.
Yeah, good time, I guess, to utilize some of the tools that we've talked about. And I don't know if we want to hint at the book that we were working on, but we talk about some tools like SWOT analysis and PESTEL analysis and Fortis 5 Forces, like different tools that you can use to understand the market that the business is operating in. You don't have the luxury usually of time to be able to do that, even on a quarterly basis, but at least on an annual basis. Come prepared to the meeting with all the financial information up to date, so you know what the year looked like, how you're positioned. Then you can start to, as a leadership team, understand the position of the overall market that you're playing in, right? And then once you've done that, you can start to look forward and put together your plans. And if you have a leadership team, it's a good opportunity to even just go off premises. I think you had mentioned that, right, Lyndon? Getting out of the office, go somewhere nice, even, right? Not necessarily tropical, go fly away, but go to a nice hotel, get a nice boardroom, or somewhere that just has a nice view or something, just to be inspired. Leadership team that I had been on, we did that once a year, 3 days. We'd go away, go to a nice location, and it would be inspiring and be really pumped to do it. And it was very, very effective. And super recommend doing that.
I think there's something else about doing it off-site as well, around just disconnecting from everything that's happening.
Yeah, 100%.
Everything that's happening in business, and focusing, because if you're there, you're still gonna be there, right? If you're not, you're not available to anybody. You can mute your phone, you can put it on silent, you can go back to those messages, or your team can figure it out. They can do without you for a day or two or three. They can do without you a lot more than what you think, right? So, but if you are there, you're technically available, and you're going to have those distractions around you all the time. So taking it offsite is super valuable, and it gets everybody that's in that leadership, in around that table, focused on like what it is that you're actually out to achieve there. And I think, also just being very clear that there should be an agenda set, and people
Mhm.
are coming to that meeting prepared with information. They need, like the CEO or the president of the company needs to be very clear on what information everybody's bringing to the table, what they're reporting, what they're sharing, and that's going to inform the outcomes of those meetings as well, and the decisions that
100%.
get made there. Yeah.
And actually, to that end, I mean, for companies that have the ability to do so, bringing somebody in to facilitate that meeting is also incredibly helpful, because then otherwise it ends up being the CEO or the president who's, trying to also be part of the conversation, but also mindful of like how we tracking with the agenda,
Yeah.
where should we go to next, right? But if you can have somebody who you just pay them to come in, is just like one fee for the couple days or whatever, and then they facilitate the conversation. They can also help navigate some of those dynamics around relationships, right? Because you might have maybe your leadership team might have like 5 people. Maybe there's 2 people who end up, occupying the majority of the airtime of the conversation, right? And so having somebody who's a third party who's disconnected from the relationship dynamics there can try to rein it in and be like, oh, okay, well, we haven't heard from so and so
Yeah.
recently, and just try to manage that as well. It can be very, very effective.
Super powerful because, like you say, I mean, there's an independent person coming in and they're kind of facilitating and they're prompting everybody around
Mm-hmm.
the table. Everybody around that table is probably getting paid really well, and they
Mm-hmm.
probably have a lot of value to add. So just making sure that we're extracting all of that value and getting it out for everybody, to leverage essentially.
It's a good way to summarize that, Lyndon. Thank you.
Yeah, so just kind of recapping and wrapping up here. So I got a couple of notes in, just benefits of establishing business rhythms that I'd like to share. I think the one is, it improves alignment around the entire organization. So everybody, on the ground doing the work, right through to the leadership team. So we were talking about those daily rhythms, those daily huddles. What is like the tactical side of things, making sure that there's a finger on the pulse, and then there's an opportunity to report back on a weekly, to maybe like a middle management level, and then monthly to more senior management or executive management, and then having that opportunity to just recalibrate, restructure, create a vision and a strategy for the future on those longer term meetings, like the quarterly and yearly meetings that you have. The other part is it enhances communication, so it promotes the dialogue, creates transparency and trust, across the team. Proactive problem solving, so you know that you're going to have these meetings. You can table it. You're going to have an opportunity to raise your concerns, or bring things up, and there's a forum for that. There's a meeting, there's a rhythm for that, right? So yeah, there's that, and then just momentum. So having that consistency and that pace, that momentum that you're moving forward with these rhythms. It's not like just something that drops off. It's you've got that consistency there. That's super important. And then continuous improvement. Everybody in alignment, continuously working together to improve the organization. That's how you grow. That's how you
Mm-hmm.
refine things. That's how your processes get improved. Your strategies become better, and you define better objectives. Through work that you're doing. Right. Yeah.
Excellent, Lyndon. Well, thank you. This has been an awesome discussion, and hopefully for anyone listening, this will be helpful just to get a sense of what's important, maybe to put in your calendar, like on a weekly or monthly or quarterly annual basis, to make sure that you keep some of these important rhythms to keep your business running smoothly, to learn from each other on the team, to make sure you're setting overall goals, make sure you're tracking with those goals, and be able to make be able to make decisions based on the information that you have moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate the conversation. This was pretty exciting. Yeah, any last sort of key takeaways from your side? I think there's one or two things that we want to leave the listeners with.
Yeah, I think a takeaway is maybe just condensing the idea that you have both tactical meetings and strategic meetings, right? So the ones that you have maybe on a like daily huddles or weekly meetings, these are going to be a little bit more tactical in nature to really help your team, do the things that they need to be doing. And then the strategy, you're looking at your monthly, quarterly, annual meetings, a bit more tied to the strategy side. That's, making sure that you're actually moving forward in the direction that you want to be going. Obviously, you want all of it to be moving, supporting the overall strategy of the organization. But yeah, that differentiation between tactical and strategic, I think, is an important one. So when people are thinking, okay, this meeting, we're not going to get into the weeds of tactical stuff, right? Like, it might be tempting because we have the conversations, the stuff's going to come up, but let's just keep it higher level. And then if, like you said earlier, if something pops up that might be a bit more tactical that needs to be addressed, at least you make a note of it and address it following that particular meeting.
Yeah, there's always going to be a forum for it, right? So, like you said,
Yeah.
There's a forum for the tactical, and then there's the forum for the strategic side of things. I think one thing where we didn't really touch on, and we can maybe bring this up in a later episode, is like performance management, and like where does that fit into the rhythms?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a pretty lengthy and complex topic to go into as well. I think just two takeaways from my side is, anybody that's looking at their rhythms or their meetings, consistency. That's like super important. So if you're going to set up a rhythm in your business, make sure that you're doing it consistently and that you're sort of tracking, like you're tracking what's happening in those meetings. You're not just meeting, and that's my next point, is having a clear agenda where you've set objectives for those meetings, and you're holding people accountable. So at the end of the meeting, you're saying, we've got some action items, we're moving forward with this, and you're reflecting on it in the next meeting to say, hey, like, Josh, how did you track with this last week?
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing what barriers or obstacles are getting in the way of making progress, and just having that opportunity to remove that from them. So making sure that there's a clear objective, a clear agenda, objectives as well, but ensuring that there's consistency in those business rhythms.
Excellent.
I think we can wrap it up there.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lyndon, and thanks everyone who listened, and we'll chat next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our conversation on building better businesses.